Welcome to GoodChristadelphianTalks. I'm Levi.
And I'm Chris.
And I'm Brian. Thank you for joining us this week.
On this podcast, we select one talk a week to help us get the Bible in our daily newsfeed.
We post a new episode at the start of each week with a short intro beforehand to kind of set the stage for the talk you're about to listen to.
And now, let's talk more about this week's talk.
So, as Levi mentioned in his introduction last week, I have been working through some old tapes that I have collected mostly from my grandfather, some old talks, and have been converting them into digital to be able to share. This talk that we're listening to this week is an exhortation by Brother Brian Luke that was given at the Idyllwild Bible School back in 1997. It is one of those tapes. What I really appreciate about this, and Brother Luke is taking an exhortation looking at Psalm 61. Psalm 61 is one of the Psalms of David talking about some of the challenges that David had over the stages of his life. And I know sometimes when we do talks on the podcast, they can sometimes be tailored to one stage of life or one age group more than the other. That's just kind of the nature of whether it's how the speaker is presenting, what age they're in, or what phase of life they're in, or even just the topic that they're focusing on. What I really appreciated about Brother Brian's talk and what he took out of this exhortation and from just the 8 verses that are in Psalm 61 is he found calls to actions and lessons for every stage of life, whether you're young, middle-aged, older, and sort of a call to action to each of them, and also a reminder to those of us that are in different stages than the stage he's talking to of what to appreciate about those that are in that stage. So whether you are in the early stages of your life or you're more in the middle-aged stage or you're in the later stages of your life, to appreciate the stage that you're in now, but also appreciate those that are in other stages and how that should all work together to make a cohesive group and what our ecclesial life should be and where the strengths are for all of those stages and how we form together to be this unified body of Christ. I really enjoyed this exhortation. There's a lot of fun nuggets. He does some really neat little Bible nuggets, which at this point, many of you may know I enjoy, where he pulls little nuggets of bits of stories out of the story of David and connects it to the time frame when this psalm was likely written, and pulls really interesting details that goes one level deeper than sort of the surface level reading that we often get, especially with a story like David's, where we've potentially studied it hundreds of times in our lifetimes and still to be able to find some new nugget about it, I found to be really, really powerful. So I hope that you enjoy this, and we have other suggestions and recommendations coming down the pike, but this was one that I listened to and felt it was really special and wanted to share it and sort of resurface it from back in the annals of history, even though 1997 doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but at this point it is. So, which makes me feel like I'm closer to the middle to end stages of my life than the early stages of my life. But there we are. So I hope that you enjoy this exhortation by Brother Brian Luke that he gave at Idyllwild back in 1997. Again, his exhortation is taken from Psalms chapter 61.
In that psalm, or the first of the 2 psalms that we read this morning, Psalm 61, we have these very beautiful words. Hear my cry, O God. Attend unto my prayer. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. One extremity or another, when my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. It's a quite remarkable statement, isn't it? God is visualized as a rock, a zer, an elevated rock that has nothing that can be brought against it by man. When he's in faraway places, when he's in the midst of overwhelming problems, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. Beautiful words, but that's not what we always do, is it? The Apostle Paul has a little comment in Hebrews 12 when he talks about matters that are too high for us, too great. And he says that in the midst of our trials, we are to be exercised thereby. It's almost a key phrase of that little section in Hebrews 12. Because sometimes in life we do have our trials that come, and sometimes thick and fast, one upon another. And there's two ways to try and meet that, isn't there? One way is that we fight it out ourselves. We say, well, we've got all these problems here, these difficulties, and we've got only a certain amount of time, and so we put our concentration upon that, and we bring our powers to be upon that, and we work our way through all those problems. And there's no question that there needs to be some resilience of our own mind and spirit and the things that we're doing. But the Apostle Paul says that in the midst of our difficulties, we are to be exercised thereby. What does that mean? Exercised thereby. He says there is something in the midst of our difficulties that we need to be thinking upon. We're going to come out of this with benefit. They can be a value. They can be a tremendous value if we are exercised in the midst of them. Some people don't do that. A lot of us don't do that in time of difficulty. We might rely upon our purse. We might rely upon our mind. We might rely upon our memory. We might rely upon our natural charisma with people, or whatever it might be, to work our way. A perception of circumstances. Weave through. When he speaks about being exercised by the chastening of the Lord, he's talking about people who truly take it to God. They take it to God in the prayer of their bedroom, or the prayer of their study, or when they're finding God in a place like this, high up on the mountain, finding quiet little spots to overcome the difficulties that all of us bring to our Sunday morning. When I was younger, I wasn't so sure that that was the case. I don't think probably a lot of our young men and women this morning would sort of be touched by the concept of afflictions and trials. But as life moves on, you begin to realize how true that is. There are many people every Sunday morning, aren't there, who bring their different concerns to the table of remembrance. Some bring problems of weariness, constantly tired, constantly weary. Others of sickness, others of pain. There'll be some people in this audience this morning that are never free from pain. Whilst for the most of us, if we've got the slightest touch of pain, we run to get the Aspro, don't we? Give us a coating, give us a Aspro, whatever. Because we don't like putting up with pain, but some of us will have pain all day. Makes us stop and think, doesn't it? Some of us come with our problems because we are concerned of our family. We can see the marks that the world is putting upon our children, and it grieves us, doesn't it? There's not that lovely rapport that there should be. So we grieve about that. We wonder if this child is going to come to the truth or not. Or are they for God, or are they going to be swept away in the world? Some have made decisions which grieve our hearts, eh? They're not here this morning. We'd love them to be here. They're somewhere else, out playing golf or baseball, and forgotten what their Sunday school taught them. Others bring problems of their own relationship to each other. Many of us this morning that would know of people that are in those circumstances. Perhaps they're not here this morning, but to this Sunday morning meeting in different parts of the earth and here this morning, there are all kinds of things that come, aren't they? Very real issues. Some think that they are no longer loved in their ecclesial environment. Some are concerned because their job is hanging by a slender thread. What will they do then? Some may be in ruin of business. Concerns occupying our minds. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee, when my heart is overwhelmed, when you can't fight it any longer. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. Beautiful words, aren't they? When do you think David sketched these words? Because it is David's psalm, Psalm 61. It says that in the superscription, doesn't it? Well, let's just piece out the little evidences of the circumstances of David when he wrote it. Obviously, verses 1 and 2 mean that he was in a time of desperation. You know, most of the Psalms are written at that time. They're not written when somebody was in armchair comfort with the air conditioner going and the carpet on the floor and everything pretty right. None of the Psalms are written like that. If we don't therefore have some circumstances that really put the pressure on us, we may never know what the Psalms are about, eh? It's really only in desperation that almost all of the Psalms are written. You take 63, "O God, thou art my God, early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee." That's not armchair comfort, is it? That's a person under pressure. "Truly my soul waiteth upon God. From him cometh my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation. My defence, I shall not be greatly moved." It's not a man out on a golf course, is it? It's a person whose relationship with God is real and tangible. That's his life. He wants to find God in the midst of the circumstances in which he's living. These are tremendous inspirations, these Psalms, aren't they? How many times in David's life did he have circumstances that evoke thoughts like that? How many times in our lives, my dear brothers and sisters, have we had circumstances like that? Here, there, perhaps. But this man had much of it in his life. But because of that, we have this rich treasure of the Psalms to help us to find our God. So it's a time of desperation. Verse 6 indicates that it was a time in his reign. It was not in his earlier days, when in desperation, for example, he fled from Saul. It's in the time of his reign. They'll prolong the king's life. It seems, verse 5, to be after the conquest of the land. "Thou hast given me the heritage of those that fear thy name." David's in great occupation. Verse 6 implies that his years are getting on. They'll prolong the king's life. And his years is many generations. Verse 2 implies that, in fact, he is far off from where he normally might be. He's not in Jerusalem. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. When we put those little bits and pieces together, it falls out to Absalom's period. Time of desperation, outside of Jerusalem, the time of his reign, enemies against him. In his older years, after he's been in occupation of the kingdom. Now let's look at Psalm 62. 62 verse 2. "He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defence. I shall not be greatly moved." That's the same as verse 7 of 62. "In God is my salvation and my glory, the rock of my strength and my refuge is in God." Or verse 6, "He only is my rock," it's the very words, "and my salvation. He is my defence, I shall not be moved." But look again at verses 6 and 7. "And are they not in fact fashioned?" Upon verse 2 and 3 of 61. It's the same theme, the same words in the Hebrew. They're being used over and over again. And so we can see that why these two Psalms have been put together, because they are intimately related. It's the same period of David's life, is the logical conclusion from that. And as we saw in 63, in the superscription, that was a psalm when he was in the wilderness of Judah. And so we can see what the psalmist has done, or what the psalter has done. He has put these together because they belong together. And as we build up that little picture together, we are therefore able to walk into David's life and the circumstances of that rebellion of Absalom. And we can see that that is where David is in his mind. Verse 3 of 62 is another key point. How long will you imagine mischief against a man? Ye shall be slain, all of you. Or as the RSV says, remember the changed translation, critical change. It says, instead of ye shall be slain, all of you, it says, how long will ye imagine mischief against a man, to shatter him, all of you? To shatter him. As a bowing wall shall he be, and as a tottering fence. They're going to push over the old fence. It's not as term you'd used of David when he was in the midst of his alacrity and skill and quickness of mind and body, is it? As an old man, you feel as though you could just push him over. Verse 4, they only consult to cast him down from his eminence, as the Revised Standard Version puts it. Not his excellency, but his eminence. He's in a high state of his reign and of his kingdom. These men are consulting to cast him down from that. So the time period of David's life is clear. When you put those factors all together, it comes out to the time that we've been able to look at today. There in the record of 2 Samuel is the outward story. And in these Psalms, we have the heart of the man. Isn't that a treasure? What a wonderful thing the Bible is. That it tells us the mind and heart. What an amazing thing this morning that we are here rejoicing in that. Americans, and Australians, and others that have come from sophisticated countries in the late 1990s, with all the things that we've got. Too many altogether. But we can come and look right in and enthuse and wonder at the mind of one of the servants of God so many years, 3,000 years ago. God has just opened it up for us. All it needs, all it's waiting for us is to sit still and come and think about it. To enter into that marvelous security. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee, when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I, for thou hast been a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy. Look at the collection of terms that are involved there. I will abide in thy tabernacle forever. I will trust in the covert of thy wings. Is he crossing Jordan when those thoughts came to him? Is he asleep in the bush before he crossed Jordan? Is somebody helping him into the boat to go over? Is he coming up on the other side? When my heart is overwhelmed, is he passing by the grave of Uriah in Rabbah? And that bringing back to him all the past? And why these things have come upon him? Is that why he says in Psalm 41 as he goes, Psalm 40 as he goes past that place perhaps, my sins are overcoming me, are swelling over me, they are innumerable. Is there that cogitation in his mind as he brings together all the circumstances of his life? As he comes to Mahanaim, sees the fortress of the city, and can see and feel far higher than that. The host of heaven, Mahanaim, two hosts that entered him. Mahanaim, he had a host. Absalom had a host. That was Mahanaim in division, wasn't it? But there was another Mahanaim that came from the original sense of the word, where the angels of God met Jacob. There was Jacob's host on the ground. There was God's host above. Mahanaim. That's the Mahanaim that he had to concentrate upon, isn't it? And my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. Required an act of faith, though, didn't it? The angels went shining out in the sky that night. He had to see it just like you and I do. In the midst of our life in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Adelaide, wherever. Cars going past and bitumised roads and people with all kinds of gadgets. And in that kind of life, my dear brothers and sisters, the angels are still working. They don't stop because men have put up big things, big buildings, and evidences of their greatness. Angels are not persuaded by those things. They're still operative, still with us in the same way. But as David had to see that out there, trudging along barefoot, head covered, the gashes of Shimei's stone still in his face. In those circumstances, he had to see the living God and feel his presence when everything was against him, it might seem. There's his mind. Wonderful, isn't it? Absolutely wonderful. You measure our own tribulations against that. You begin to think, my word, we should be thankful. Whatever our circumstances, how we ought to think about our God and take him with us for all the blessings that he daily loads upon us. Imagine David sending up the harsh slopes of Gilead. He's crossed Jordan and he's coming up. You know, that's tough country. It's tall country. It's rough country. It's tough. And it was the reverse of where Jacob came. He crossed the river Jabbok as he went after Rabbah. He would have crossed Jabbok. He would have thought to himself, that's where Mahanaim got its name, wasn't it? He would have thought, I'm going the opposite direction of Jacob. Jacob came into the land, and I'm going up out of the land. Thou hast given me the heritage of those that love me. And he was leaving it. But this is what he was saying inwardly. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. We practice this in different stages of our life. And it becomes easier, my dear brothers and sisters, if there is history to fall back upon. David had history to fall back upon. Look at his thoughts in Psalm 27. This wasn't his first time in the wilderness, remember? It all would have been coming back to him. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? That's not armchair comfort, is it? That's a man who really knows his God and loves his God. And God is to him a ready presence, a reality in his life. He's not always talking with people. He's not always about things. He's not always seeing the things that are in the roads and seeing the things in the cities and all the activities of men. He's seeing his God as though he could touch him and feel him. The Lord is my light and my salvation, the strength of my life. It isn't doing even the readings, is it? He's left the readings and God is in that, is with him. He's taken the readings with him. It's in his heart and in his mind. He's throbbing with his delight in God. What a challenge to us, my dear brothers and sisters, on the last morning of our Bible school. Look at all the blessings we've had. Do we take that with us? Is that spirit with us? Pack our goods. Put our children's things in. Pack up all the blankets and so on. And it can all be matter of fact. And some of us can live like that. We're always happy if there's something to do. But there's something much greater than that, isn't it? That's what Bible school's all about. It's to be living with God. Things, so what? What God wants is our heart with him. That we could say with David, Yahweh is the strength of my life. There's a motivated man. He's going to go back into Brighton and he's going to go back into Los Angeles. Wheresoever. Driven. Because he's come to love his God. And he'll make some sacrifices. He and she. Little notes are being made in the mind now. I've got to give away this. I've got to cancel that. I've got to throw that out of my home. I've got to put away those magazines that are no good. I've got to put some of those hobbies and other things I'm interested in that are not helping me in the way of life. I've got to draw near to my child. That's what I've got to do. I see the marks of the world upon him. I've got to get in there and draw near to him. I've got to open my heart. My Sunday school class where I've got some children that need extra care, I'm going to have to think about that. Draw near to them. Those older people in the meeting that I haven't spoken to for a month, I've got to get to know them. All kinds of resolutions that can make our ecclesia sparkle with the fact that we know God lives. Though an host, verse 3, should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise up against me, in this will I be confident. The man that strides up the hills of Gilboa is just the same man, isn't he? He's been through it all before. There was a time when he was at rest here with his little camp of 600 men, and on the other side of the crag of the mountain, there was Saul with his 3,000 men. And he lived like that for years. Just a niche away from death. He had learnt to depend upon God. And he was again a long way away from Jerusalem. He was in exile from the land that is far away, called unto his God. One thing have I desired of the Lord, verse 4. Isn't this our David? Our David in Mahanaim, our David in Gilead? One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of Yahweh and to inquire in his temple. There's a man of God, my dear friends and sisters. Are there any more beautiful words in the Bible than that? They're David's words. They're our David. David after sin, after Bathsheba. That's exactly how he still thinks, though, isn't it? Trained in youth. Cycles of life came around and it's picking it all up again. It's as though he's gone back there. But because he's left tracks, mental tracks, he's able to go back to those mental tracks and pick them up again and go along the same path. The virtue of teaching our children, my dear friends, is to serve with us. There's a lot of things that have been done for this Bible school, and it's been lovely to see on oft occasions your children hurrying around doing things. It's a lovely thing. Highly commendable. To have those children coming to our tables, happy to serve, weren't they? All of them. Lovely children. Any little want, salt, pepper, whatever. Run to back and get it and so on. That's excellent. Keep it up. Incorporate them in the work, in the service. In your ecclesias, do that. Chairs to be shifted. Come on, children, let's get on with this. Teach them to serve. Teach them to have their bedrooms clean and tidy. Because it's in all these little services and greater things that they come to make their tracks. Service is so critical to ecclesial life. That's what it's about, isn't it? He that will come up after me, says Jesus, let him take up his cross. Our children have got to feel that early in life. They don't get later on in life and think that everything's for them. They've got to have this, that, and the other laid on. Because we've made them to get up early and to do what they need to do, to help us. David had been like that. Why did God take him in his early years into exile and have to hunt through the wilderness of Judah while an unworthy king sought him from day to day? Why did he do that? Surely he deserved more than that. This was a faithful man right from the start almost. God called him separately. It was Samuel on the land, but he came separately. As though God was saying, I have found him as a special person, and he was. But why did God then take him through all those circumstances? Because he will take him from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, great with young, and caring for all their weaknesses and vicissitudes. You take him from there to be king over my people Israel, to sit upon the throne. That's exactly what we are doing with our children. Don't take service from them, my dear brothers and sisters. Look at this service here that he learned here. That drew him to his God. Don't be happy that your children or mine are in their room by themselves, living their own little life with their own TV set or something. What a disaster. Unrelated to the interests of the family. It happens. I know it happens in these days because that's what everybody thinks ought to have. Got their own plugs in their ear listening to their music. As though it's some different life to the life of yours and of the truth. And the living God. Got to assess these things, don't we, carefully together as we're going away from Bible school so that our children might learn in early life a track of faith. One thing have I desired, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. Is that any different from, for thou hast been a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy? I will abide in thy tabernacle forever, said a man in exile. I will trust in the covert of thy wings. It's exactly the same thing, isn't it? He's away from the tabernacle, but he can see that God is with him out there. The tabernacle is, as it were, still mobile, and always is. Well, it's in California. It's here at Idyllwild. The covert of God's wings is upon us. He's protecting and interested, concern for his people is wherever his people are. It's the same man that was once in exile that is there again. An unchanged man. What about the middle years? What about Bathsheba, Uriah, and so on? How did that ever happen? It was in his middle years, wasn't it? In an old brother once, probably never said a word on a platform, had morning tea with us once at our place of work, my brother and I. And he was a wise old person. As he was just enjoying our time together, he said, you know, Jim and Brian, he said, God has been very good to you. He said, you're now in your middle years and you've got family and so on and so on. He said, a lot of people, when they get to their middle years, ruin their lives. He said, be careful. That God has blessed you, be careful not to ruin your middle years. He's never ever said anything like that before. It was just an old sagacious brother who perceived things and wisely had a word to say. Isn't that a lovely thing? Treasure those words. Because we do get over the hill, don't we? I see you up there working with your little children. I remember it all. It's different to be at Bible school with little children than to be just a couple here, isn't it? Much more difficult. Much more difficult. But you've paid off the loan. The house is yours. You can choose what car you might like to have. Job security has been there for many years. And it doesn't mean, does it, that necessarily draws us back to God. It could mean that therefore we want something else and else and else and else. And there's more frontiers to conquer. And in that, temptations arise. That's undoubtedly what happened to David, isn't it? In the middle years, brethren, of our middle years, that's when it caught David. When he had achieved so much and life was not quite so much uphill, but was now coming to the plateau, as it were, to the prime years of life. But this psalm that we have shows that even after the consequences of tragedy, God is able to be found. In this psalm, David has come up out of that, and he's still exactly the same mentally as he was when he was in exile as a younger man in earlier years. Yahweh prepares, verse 7, mercy and truth, which may preserve him. And there was a particularly touching matter, wasn't there? Just at the end of that story, back in our story that we've had this week. He prepares mercy and truth. If that was said just before this event, and how wonderfully David would have seen a fulfillment of those words in this event. 2 Samuel 17. 2 Samuel 17. It came to pass, verse 26, so Israel and Absalom pitched in the land of Gilead. What a terrible thing. Father and son. Out of Israel together. Two different armies. So Israel and Absalom. David didn't even have his nation. His treacherous and wicked son had that. So Israel and Absalom pitched in the land of Gilead. A harsh land. It came to pass Could there be a greater note of tragedy than verse 26? It's like a summary of the tragedy. And the next verse, it came to pass when David was come to Mahanaim, when he was overcome, when the consequences of all that he had done were at their height. It came to pass when David was come to Mahanaim, that Shobi, the son of Nahash of Rabbah, the place of his shame, and Makah, the son of Amiel of Lodabar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite of Rogelim. They brought everything they could possibly think of. They brought beds, and the record just goes on to talk about it. 2 whole verses are used to describe the multitude of stuff that came. They brought beds, they never had them before. They slept under the bush. Basins and earthen vessels, wheat, barley, flour, parched corn, beans and lentils and parched pulse. Mercy and truth thou hast prepared for me. Honey, butter, sheep, cheese of kine, like you'd have on a king's table, for David and for the people that were with him to eat. Or they said, in their sympathy and their love, the people is hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. Bring tear to your eye, my dear brothers and sisters. Beautiful thing, isn't it? The greatest tragedy, verse 26, mercy and truth met him, verse 27, 29. You know who those 3 men were? Shobi, it says, the son of Nahash of Rabbah. Shobi was a prince of the Ammonites. Can you imagine anything more unlikely than that? Do you remember that David sent a messenger to Nahum, who was Shobi's brother, the other prince and now king? He sent messengers to them to show kindness, he said, because of Hanun, because of Nahash, their father's sake. And you remember how Nahum railed against David's messengers? And he sent them back with half their beard cut. This Shobi is that king's brother. He's the second most important person, perhaps, among the children of Ammon. The children of Ammon? Would you have thought that anything could come out of Ammon that could be favourable to David at this circumstance? That was the place of his sin. It was the place where Uriah was buried. It was the place where he'd showed, it seems, exceptional cruelty. And at this time, when you might have thought those people would join with Absalom with a relish, the prince of the Ammonites comes out, the brother to the king, and he comes with all these things, joining in with these other men. How do they think of it? How do they get it together so quickly? There was response in his heart. You know, it says when David sent those messengers that his mind was towards Nahum. It was to show him kindness. And that word is kesed. Prepare mercy, kesed, and truth, says the psalm. God will prepare mercy and truth. David had thought to send mercy to the king of Ammon, to make a decent arrangement with him because of the kindness of his father in time past. It was a loving gesture, an extended, generous gesture. This Shobi comes at David's greatest extremity, and with great danger, no doubt, to himself and the disparagement of his partisans. But he comes despite all of that and his own reputation, and he loads David with all that the kingdom of Ammon could load. What an incredible thing, my dear brothers and sisters. Do you think God was in that? The God of Israel? Despite Uriah? Despite David's sin? Why? Because David was a man of kesed. And with the merciful, God will show himself merciful. As a man meets, so will it be measured to him again. Don't forget mercy, my dear brothers and sisters, in our ecclesial judgments. There may be a time when our hand is out for mercy, And it will come to us according as we've given it to others. Stand by the principles, indeed. But don't forget mercy. Maker. He's there. Who's this Maker? The son of Amiel of Lodabar. Come back to chapter 9. He's actually mentioned before in the record. 2 Samuel 9. When David was inquiring, is there any left of the house of Saul, that I might show him Chesed? Oh, isn't it? It's the word of David's life. 9 verse 1. Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness, Chesed, the loving kindness, the steadfast love. That's the whole meaning of the word. Unchanging love. That I may show him Chesed for Jonathan's sake. He loved Jonathan, didn't he? Now he's at the peak of his power. Is absolute power going to corrupt absolutely? In the peak of his power, on either side of this chapter are all of his war achievements. In the peak of that circumstance, he thinks of the covenant he made with his beloved friend that's been so long decaying in the grave, that I may show him Chesed. And it was told him, wasn't it, by Ziba, that there was one called Mephibosheth, and he was alive. The king said unto him, where is he? Verse 4. Ziba said unto the king, well, he's way off in exile. Behold, he's in the house of Maker, the son of Amiel in Lodabar. That's the man. That's the same man. Chapter 17. This man must have been on the side of Saul. He must have been. Because he was prepared to billet into his house this remnant of the previous dynasty. Pretty useless sort of man in terms of what he could do around the house. But he took compassion upon him and brought him into the house. And the messengers of David came in verse 5. Then King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Maker, the son of Amiel from Lodabar. And you can imagine that when Maker saw him going out the front gate and going down the road, he would have thought, that's the last I'll ever see of Mephibosheth. David is making sure there is no remnant that could ever rise up against him from the previous dynasty. But he was so wrong, wasn't he? Never mind what the messengers said, Maker must have thought that's what would happen. Yet in fact, David took him and he put him among his sons at his table. David's sons, Jonathan's sons, my sons, right in the middle of them. And eventually that story would have come back, wouldn't it? Coming back over Jordan. Did you hear what happened to Mephibosheth, Maker? No, I suppose that he's dead now. No, he isn't. I visited Jerusalem to the tabernacle, and Mephibosheth is sitting at the king's table. What would David want to have Maker? To have Mephibosheth at his table for? He was a lame man. How does he fit in with all the celebration of the royal house? David's got him there among his sons. And Maker would have gone back to his house. He would have surely seen in that there was a man of God. He knew the story about Jonathan. Mephibosheth no doubt knew that, told him, and got back somehow. He thought, what a wonderful man. A man of steadfast love. And now, when the wheel of fortune has turned, and Maker hears that David has come to his exile country, as it were, over Jordan, he gathers up all the things of his considerable home, and he rushes to the scene to show him the Chesed of the Lord. Mercy and truth met. And then, of course, there was Barzillai, the Gileadite of Robert. 3 great men. So God remembers, my dear brothers and sisters, doesn't he? The cycles of life can turn. Cast thy bread upon the waters. After many days it shall return unto thee. Just coming back to our psalm. You know, David had the best years ahead of him. Are we older in years? We've spoken of the young, we've spoken of the middle age. Are we older in years? Just a final thought. We're really a family together, aren't we? He says in verse 6, thou wilt prolong the king's life, and his years as many generations. Well, you know, he did prolong David's life. He looked as sick as though he was about to go. Later in the time of Adonijah's reign, he looked like he was so cold that his metabolism had slowed down. They couldn't keep him warm. There's nothing they could do to keep the old king warm. And yet after that, he had the greatest years of his life. Are the legs a little frail, dear brother, dear sister? Is the mind not as strong, perhaps? Remember David in his older years, when he cried unto God and said, now that I am old and grey-headed, forsake me not. And he wasn't forsaken. Old age in the truth is not to let the reins go. We need you. We need your consistency. We need your inspiration. You know, the old sisters or brothers that come to the Bible class despite rain or shine, despite weariness or pain, and sit along the row are an inspiration to us, aren't they? All of us feel that way. To have our older ones here climbing up the mountain, to be with us to celebrate in the things of God together. What an inspiration that is. We've felt it this week many times. All of us have felt that. As we go into older years, don't look for easing off. Some little spot down, on the coast that's far away from reality. We need you. We need you in our ecclesial life. We love to have you. David's best years, he said in his later years, I set my affection to the house of my God. Just as true for us today, isn't it? Think to build, older brothers and sisters, we need your steadfast example. We need the constancy of your mind, your prolonged example among us. But there's more here, isn't it? This is more than just an extension of present life. His years as many generations. Verse 4, I will abide in thy tabernacle forever. He shall abide, verse 7, before God forever, before God. Verse 8, so will I sing praise unto thy name forever, that I may daily perform my vows. This is a man who daily, in the small unit of life, presently, is daily performing his vows, but that life is going to go on forever. It's in the little things, brilliant in the basics, that take us on to eternal life. This psalm is not limited. The Spirit of God that moved David to say this is projecting the scene for all of us, coming right through to our times, motivating every day of our lives to daily perform our vows, not just on Sunday morning, but every day of our life, filling it with the things of God, that we might go on unto the eternal life that is to come. Why is that so? Because as we read this morning, the keepers did quake. The keepers of the grave, tried to lock the Lord Jesus Christ into death. They shook because the angel of life, he came and he unlocked that stone. He pushed it back. He brought forth our Lord Jesus Christ, and he gave him life forevermore. And so we push on with our daily vows, my dear brothers and sisters, in love of each other, in love of the truth, in love of our God, that we too, whatever stage of life we might be in, may be able to share with him that eternal life for which we long.
Thank you for listening to the Good Christadelphian Talks podcast. We hope this talk helped you in your walk and brightened your day. If you would like to hear more, please subscribe for new episodes. We are on all major podcast platforms and also on YouTube. If you enjoyed this particular talk, please share it with someone else who you think might enjoy it too. For show notes on the talk you just listened to, visit our website at GoodChristadelphianTalks.com or check out the show notes section of your podcast player. Please share your thoughts on the talk from this week on our Facebook or Instagram pages where we are at Good Christadelphian Talks, or leave a comment on our YouTube channel where these talks are posted as well. If you enjoy listening to the talks that we post and hear one that you think we should share, please tell us about it. You can send us a suggestion using the Contact Us tab on our website or message us on any of our social media accounts. Thank you for listening. God bless, and talk to you next week.